Hey guys, my name is Trevor.
Hey guys, my name is Sawyer.
I'm James.
I'm Natalie.
All right, Trev, start us off.
Let's do it. Let's see here. I think. All right, first question. Why should someone sign up for an exposure trip?
Well, we signed up for an exposure trip just to take our whole family. There's 5 of us, my wife, Natalie, Rachel, and Charlie, my son. And that was just an experience we wanted to give them. My wife and I have done Mexico when we were younger. And now that we have kids, when this opportunity came up, it was something a little different. And I love how the Well does they call it an exposure trip. It wasn't just, hey, we're going to go build some houses and feel great about ourselves. It was going and just helping Students International and seeing what Students International is doing in Costa Rica, where we were for our first trip, and then letting the kids see another culture that is just outside of the United States that we may not have thought of to go to. But it was just taking our kids to see something and expose them to something that they wouldn't have had.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. And like you said, we here at the Well, they call it exposure trips because you do get exposed to people, cultures, languages, the way people interact with God in different areas of the world. And it's such a special time to just like see those different cultures and to see the beauty of God's creation in other places. And I think when you start to kind of break down those other cultures, you get really humbled by it. I've been on a couple exposure trips so far, and I think a lot of the why that comes to my mind is you get a level of humility that you just don't get here in the States, and it's because it's a very materialistic world that we're living in right now, and it's hard to look past that unless you're going into it. And so when you do go to these other countries, third world countries or even just any other country, you start to see what life looks like, and you start to see the beauty of God's kingdom in a different culture. And I think, again, that's the beauty of why it is an exposure trip, because you just don't see that here as often, if at all.
I think exposure trip's a good word for it because you're being exposed, right? It's not like you're not going to be the hero of some place. You're there to witness what, like as you guys have alluded to, what God is doing and how much bigger He is than the framework that you have, having grown up here in the States. And it was my first time going on an exposure trip at the Well, so it's really cool to see how God has used different people from all different parts of the earth to come to where I went was Thailand. Is a village near the city of Chiang Mai, and how they work together to really empower and support a group of people in a tribe in the mountains somewhere random to actually embrace the gospel, but then also learn what it means to also meet like their physical needs. And like, so the Lord is very kind in doing all the things there. Like He literally is sustaining everything. And so here it's very easy to go like, oh yeah, I go to church and this is fine. Like I don't have to worry about, most people here don't have to worry about like what they're going to eat or what they're going to drink or when they get to drink. That's not the case over there. Clean water is not a thing. So to see their joy on their faces despite their circumstances is really cool. So I was exposed to what I would call like the pure joy of the Lord in a different setting. So that was really cool.
Yeah, I think to add on, like you get to see how God's already working there. Just because you're there, it's not like you're now bringing the gospel and the whole country's going to change, but see how God's currently working and moving in there too.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I'll roll into the next question here. So what did you enjoy the most? Probably referring to, a mission trip that you went on recently. I think for me, I've been on 2 mission trips. The first of which was to Costa Rica to work with Students International there. And then the other was last summer with Students International again, serving with them in the Dominican Republic. And I think I think what stood out to me a lot and what I enjoyed is kind of like what you said, is just like you see a level of joy in these people, and the whole focus of life isn't very like here we see like the go 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 mentality, and it's always just how efficient we can be in life. But there it's such a different perspective of I'm going to have joy in whatever circumstances I'm given. And a lot of those circumstances from our perspective is very poverty stricken. And I think just seeing their joy, like they have relational abundance there. And I think that's such a beautiful piece of God's kingdom, because they don't have what we would describe as, all the materialistic things that we have. But they have so much joy in what they do have. And a lot of that is rooted in just relationships with each other. So I think a lot of what I enjoyed of, both of my exposure trips that I've been on, is the humility of the efficiency and the go, go, go mentality of life isn't as important as those relationships that you build with others around you. And just the humbling there it's just such a unique experience for sure.
I like what you said about relationships, because on the way back from Thailand, we were doing this thing called a one word. Like, how would you describe your time there? My word was relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason being, I've been kind of like thinking through and like processing what it means to have relationship with God, and how relational our God is with his people, and how he's created us to be relational people with one another, the body of Christ. We all have parts to play in the body, and all equally important. But then also there's a call to actually care for one another, carry one another's burdens, and stuff like that, to sharpen one another. And so God does that in us through the Spirit, but then he also calls us to have that same Spirit to work within each other, right? To work out one another. And so seeing that it's possible to do that with other people in a different country, no huge language barrier, by the way, and yet here we are laughing all together the same, and praising God all the same, and watching how they do worship. It's so easy to still walk into that with them and do their dances with them and their songs with them, have no idea what they're saying outside of a couple words, but we're all praising the same God, and then we're living a relationship with one another and with God. And so that's kind of the big takeaway I had too.
Yeah, I think like what Trevor was saying is like you don't need to know their language to like experience stuff with them and show them the love of the Lord. And you can even do that. Like I was at a volleyball site in the DR, and we were playing volleyball, but we were still like showing what it is to live your life for the Lord and how you do it through that.
Yeah. The most fun, I think, the thing that kind of caught us off guard, I don't know, fun, I think that was what the question was, is again, just being, because in Costa Rica, well, we were staying at host families' houses, and with a family of 5, for us, my wife and I were in separate homes, and so we would only have the walk from the public bus that we would take to their host family home, and then my daughter and I would walk another block to our home. But it was just being engulfed in the city. As we were walking the streets, and most of the time it was raining, and we were taking public transportation, and I've never sat directly behind a bus driver. Like we were back to back basically, and it was raining, the bus was full, and I'm like, this would never happen in Fresno. This would never happen in the States, but it was just an experience. And the kids too, they're just like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Like there's way too many people on this bus. But just that, again, engulfing and exposing our kids to just, this is how other people do life. They have cafecita, which is just something where they would bring us in, and we would just sit there, and they would share with us how their family grew up, or who was living in the home with them. And as we're sitting in this home, it reminded us, and it reminded me of all of the things that I had at home, where I'm looking around this house, and they may have a front living room, but as you got to the kitchen and you kept going back, it was just dirt. There was nothing that was kind of keeping some of the elements away. it was a lot of just openness. But for them, that was an openness to just open their home. It didn't matter, and they didn't care. They were wanting us to come in and just be part of their family. So that was just one of those things that we really enjoyed while we were there.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, here we go. Here's next. It says, what did you see or experience, or what did you meet that was a highlight? I think, again, so one of the things that we got to do, we did sports. So that was one of the things we were doing is sports. And we are not a big soccer family, but we were like, okay, we're going to go do this. It's going to be awesome. One of the things we had to really quickly realize in Costa Rica was they run on their own time, and you have to be fluid. And I don't think we did anything sports related really a ton. The group that we were with ended up going to plant trees at a campsite that one of the pastors that knew one of the guys at Students International, and he needed help, so we went and planted a bunch of trees. We got to go to a public school in the area, and we got to go to Cafecita, which was an awesome experience. But then one of our last days there, again, the world does a great job in preparing us as we go to these other countries, because one of the things was, hey, can you tell your story in 3 minutes or less? Can you do that? And while we were there, one of our extended families, Jesse, was running a women's Bible study. And it was raining and pouring, and so there was no soccer being played that day. And so our leaders took us to the Bible study, and we were just kind of standing in the back, and Jesse asked, hey, would you like to share your story with the group? And I'm like, sure, yeah, totally, okay. And just being able to share kind of just what God has gotten me through, because, you know, you go to a different country, you're like, how do they really do a Bible study? And when we came around the corner, they're all staring at this laptop, and Francis Chan is on the computer screen, but Francis Chan was not speaking, he was speaking Spanish, and I knew that wasn't his voice. But just all the adaptations that they made for them to watch that, and they were getting the gospel just as much as we were in the same way, because I'm like, we probably have seen that video at some point, or heard him say these words, but being able to be blessed to share my story with that group of ladies, it was really just a kind of a humbling experience, and being able to show kind of we all praise and love the same God, and he's doing the same work in all of us, no matter where we are. Even in the United States, we still struggle with the same exact things. And it was a humbling experience. It was just something that I really, really will never forget.
Yeah, I love that you brought up, just sharing your story. And I think that's one of consistently been one of my favorite experiences on these trips, is getting to hear other people's stories. Because when you go to these countries and you hear from people who are serving, with Students International or any other organization that you're going to help serve with, man, you just get such a picture of what God's grace is and what the gospel is and what it means to serve. Because some of these people, I mean, like Jessie, for example, she dropped everything here and she went to move to Costa Rica. And like, when you hear some of these people's stories, like, it is such a beautiful picture of what true servants towards the Lord looks like. And I think as you just like hear these people's stories, it's so special to hear people and their obedience towards the Lord. And I think there's so much to learn from that. And just, again, hearing these people's stories, it's such a sweet time. And I think there's so much to learn from other people as they are, diving headfirst into these different countries and serving with different, kinds of organizations. Just hearing their heart behind it, I think there's so much inspiration there too, of how we can serve, while we're there, or what we can do to serve God when you come back here, to the States and to Fresno and to the Valley, and what that servant heart looks like here and wherever we're called to next.
Yeah, I think it was cool because we were in the DR for 2 weeks, so we got to make relationships with the site leaders and see like how they grew up through SI. And it was cool that one of our site leaders, she like was a student in SI who was getting help from them, and then is now one of the leaders of the women's volleyball site. So just see how they like grew their faith through SI and hear their stories and how they were similar from ours, even though we didn't speak the same language and we're in different countries across the world.
I think the cool experience from this last trip, I think it was really special how they brought us in and let us stay like in different homes and stuff like that. But as the week went on, relationships really grew to the point that we're having our translators tell each other like, hey, we want you guys to come back, or we wish we could go with you. And I thought that was special because, getting back to the relationships things, like we were talking the whole time as a team what it means to have the ministry of presence while we're there. We're not, again, because we're not there. Like, yeah, we're doing some help with like a well, a school, and digging some trenches and stuff for the piping. And just that was like the big project there, right? But the beautiful thing was just being present with these people, entering in lives with them, just getting a glimpse of what how they experienced life, and through that we just learned how to be with them. And that was like the best thing, because now it felt like we were just friends, like we were just the same body, like the idea of being the same body again. And I think that's throughout my whole team that went. I think everyone said that they just really enjoyed getting to know the people in the village. And it's actually kind of funny. We got to a point where some of the older moms and dads in the villages started seeing some of the younger team members, like teenagers and stuff like that. They're like, hey, if you were here, you could be like my future daughter-in-law or my future son-in-law. So it was so funny. And we're just translating it all, but it was like the funniest thing, and it was just very sweet to see that. And so yeah, just again, really big on what it means to actually be present with people. You think about Jesus, he was present with people. Whoever he came into contact with, he was with them. He knew them, he saw them, knew that their need was for him, right? But he was with them and stayed with them until he lovingly guided them to see that he is the way. And so I thought it was really cool that we got to, in a way, live that out, and just getting to know them, getting to love them, and say like, even though we're in America, we're not like better or anything like that. We're just here doing the same thing with you. And so that was really cool.
Because I think that's the interesting thing. I think we've all worked with students, and you being a student yourself, and that it took us to go to another country to see exactly what's happening here, right? You're mm-hmm. like, no, people want us to be present. There are people who are searching for someone to be close to, be part of, do life with, to build relationships with. And I'm in education, and I see that all the time, and it helps just help me realize too, if this is the way I want to do my job, is I want to be present. I want to be there for my students, because that's what they need, and that's what God has put me here for. And all across the world, everybody's feeling the same way, as they just need someone and want someone to be present with them. And for us to be able to come in with the gospel and having that background, we know that in the end, it's going to pay dividends mm-hmm. that we may never, ever see. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the awesome part, because we do walk away thinking, how did I plant a seed in anybody that I met mm-hmm. while I was gone this week? Or how is this going to prepare me, Lord, for what is to come in my life? And for my daughters and my family, that was one of the biggest things that drew us to take them, was how can I plant the seed of what God is doing across the globe and pay dividends maybe that I will never, ever get mm-hmm. to see as a father, mm-hmm. but how will that pay dividends when she finds a husband, when she has children herself. Like those are the things that drove me to want. But it's all relational, right? It all comes back to that one thing. It's that relational connection.
Yeah.
So good.
Okay. The next question is, what was the most unique thing you ate?
Ooh.
I mean, we didn't really eat anything super unique. I'm not gonna lie. We had some fruits that I've never had. My son, so Charlie loves fruit. He loved star fruit while we were there. So when he came home, we tried to look for star fruit everywhere and couldn't find it. My wife was looking at sprouts, everything, right? We finally found some, and it's not the same. Well, this time we're going back to Costa Rica as leaders. And while we're in Costa Rica, my daughters will be in the Dominican Republic. So we're kind of going off in two different directions almost. But I told Charlie, I said, hey, buddy, like, do you know why we're at this meeting? And he goes, well, because sisters are going on an exposure trip. And I said, well, there might be an opportunity where you, Mom, and I, without sisters, go back to Costa Rica. And his first thing was, can I have more star fruit? I said, yes, buddy.
Let's
Star
go.
fruit, definitely star fruit. So he was in after that. He was good.
That's awesome.
So the village, when we were in the village, they made this soup with the different types of fungus,
Oh.
mushroom type, edible fungus, right? But there was this one that was like, it's like black.
Black is the color of death.
Yeah, but I'm not gonna lie, it was good.
Yeah?
It was good. But I guess that would be the most interesting we ate, because everything else is kind of like, we got the whole tourist thing. Like, when we were in the city, it was like pad thai, all that stuff. But in the village is where we got all the more different things, which was kind of funny because a lot of the food was similar to like how I grew up. And then just for reference for people listening, it's like I grew up in a Mien family. That's one of the tribes in the area that we went. And so it was kind of special going to a place to see how my parents grew up a little bit as kids before they came to America. So I got to witness what it was like to live there in a hut and, not have like, for the most part, there's kids like with no shoes and stuff like that. But so there were some things there like really spicy. That's what I'm trying to say. They really like spicy, so all the peppers chopped up, and they would always have some kind of ground protein of some kind, whether it was fish or pork or like shrimp or like sardines, and it's just loaded with spice. That was fun. I don't know what half of it was. Most of the time I just ate it.
That's all you can do.
Yeah.
And you can't complain.
But
No matter what they give you, you can't complain.
here's the thing, though. It was actually delicious.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a big win then.
At least I thought it was delicious.
Yeah. I mean, for me, like in the DR, Natalie, I feel like we ate good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, honestly, my joke over there half the time was like, I'm eating better in the DR in a third world country than I was at home when I'm cooking my own food. So I have no complaints. I did hear, and I don't know if you tried it, but I did hear that some of the girls got to try it. Was it chicken foot?
Mm-hmm.
Did you try that?
I didn't, but a bunch of the other girls did.
Yeah, I was like,
I have kids who only eat like plain pasta.
simplicity.
Yeah, we're a carbs thing, and if it's anything outside of the ordinary, it's not happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, maybe this year you could try some chicken foot.
I think for me, I'm so picky. So coming into it, I was like, I don't know what I'll eat and what I won't. So I definitely packed a bunch of snacks. But I think in the DR, like Sawyer said, it was good food. But then there was one night, and it was more of like what more of the people like ate there and more like traditional. And it was way different than what we were eating the whole week. So just to see like this is what they eat every day. But after dinner, we were like, oh, we're still hungry.
Mm-hmm.
But this is what like that's their meal for either the day or just for dinner.
I think going back to what you said, you got to go back and see where your parents like grew up or lived before they came to the States. Like I try to do that with the kids and show them where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it being on the other side of the world, almost like that's a hard thing, but what a great thing to be able to say, hey, Mom, Dad, I did get to see that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it wasn't like exactly the same thing, but
Yeah.
I'm sure it's very similar with. I mean, you as you drive to the village, like you see multiple like villages on the way through the mountains and stuff, and they're all kind of similar. So
Yeah.
it's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's sweet. You want to go again, Trev?
Yeah. Let's see what we got here. Why are you going back on an exposure trip? So I guess if you
If you've been
want
on
to go
one-
one, if you want to go on another one, why?
I think for me, I went to Costa Rica with my family and then the DR last year with the high school team. So going back this year with the DR. But I think for me, just to go and see the people again, not me hoping that they'll like remember me, but just to see how they've like how God's moving in their life still, and how like SI is still keeping those relationships even while we're back at home. Sometimes like forgetting about and putting them on the back burner, but they're still working there constantly. And this time I get to go with my sister, so just to experience that with her, it's gonna be really cool.
Yeah, I think for me, my first 2 trips were to Costa Rica and the DR, and they were both with Students International. And so this summer I'm going to Thailand, but we're going to be serving with an organization called Crew. And so the unique opportunity that we have is we're going to be teaching a little bit of English on some university campuses. And so obviously not something I'm familiar with, but the unique part there is that we're going to be able to share a little bit of the gospel with these people and with these students and just evangelize to them a little bit. So that is definitely far from what I would consider one of my spiritual gifts, is just evangelizing to people. So for me, it's a very unique opportunity where I can just challenge my faith and challenge what God has for me and how he can use my strengths and weaknesses in this situation to just evangelize these people and share the gospel with them. It's such a unique opportunity, especially, obviously when you're talking about people and communicating in a different language. Like, we stumble over our words just talking to each other in English with each other, right? And then all of a sudden I have to go and try to dialogue perfectly with the translator. And like, how am I supposed to share the gospel with somebody like that, Right. And so I think for me, it's just, it's one of those things that it's a step of faith, and a lot of the times people describe these exposure trips as putting yourself out of your comfort zone, which I think is a great way to describe it, because it is such a different, unfamiliar setting in multiple different aspects. And so for me, this is just a very challenging way where I can put my faith in a place that I'm definitely not comfortable, and I would say even don't have a ton of confidence with too. So that's kind of why I'm going on this trip.
But think about the confidence that you've gained on those 2 other trips. Like, you still had to go through a translator, right, in Costa Rica and in the DR. But again, it goes back to relationships. Like, they're just looking for relationships, and as soon as they see that you're in, that you're all in, they're gonna step up and want to do that. And as soon as those walls get torn down, that's an opportunity, and what a great opportunity to do that. So that's kind of, we always think about, well, what has God got me through or helped me through or gotten me ready from preparing me for what? And that may be just this trip and just being able to do that. That's kind of an awesome next step.
Yeah. And just to like speak on that too, like I think the reason why it makes me a little nervous too, and it is such a jump of faith, is because I think like 1 or like 3% of the people there know Jesus.
Yeah.
If they would recognize the name Jesus or know the gospel. So it's like we're going into a place where there's no familiarity either. And so that's also where it's like we got to like break down a foundation here of like, who is this Jesus person? What did he do for me? Why do I need a savior? And just like, you got to learn how to formulate what it means to be a Christ follower. And I think that that's just like something I've kind of breezed by most of my life, because a lot of interactions people here know of God, know of Jesus, and that they, they've either accepted him, denied him, whatever, but you can still have a conversation of a little bit of a foundation of who that is. Yeah. Right. And so just without any of that knowledge there, I think it changes the whole perspective and the whole dialogue there. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned something kind of interesting about, or what I heard was like, when you go into the situations like this, like you're really put into a position where you really can't rely on yourself
Mm-hmm.
and your own
Amen.
gifts or whatever talents you have, right? Um, you are forced solely to rely on the Lord to do all of the work and just be a witness and a
Mhm.
faithful servant. And I think that's one of the special things about going on the trips, going on exposure trip. Um, and that would be like the one thing I would say is like why I would go again is because that experience of just like having open hands and just kind of surrendering the whole time and just like, all right, Lord, this is all you. Like I'm gonna be here. I'll just try to do whatever it is that you want me to do, but I can't do any of it without you, you know. And so like it's gonna be all you. And I think that's real. I think that's like something so special about the exposure trips in particular. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the reason I want to go back, and my wife and I with Charlie, is just again we had an awesome time seeing what SI is doing, what Students International is doing there, and getting to take other people there and show them those things and just help them along the way. But also just be able to see more of, I feel like, yes, we were a little bit spoiled while we were there because we did get to see a lot of different things, schools, after school program, a camp. I mean, we drove 30, 40 minutes out of the city and everyone else stayed within blocks of, or, you know, a 10-minute drive from where we were or where home base was. And so we did get to see a lot, but I'm just eager to see even more. And then to take Charlie now that he is 10 to do this again. He's going to be the only kid on the trip this year. And he was the last time we went to, and so he more became like the team mascot. So he's looking forward to that again.
Nice.
Yeah, if I could, I would go back to Thailand, and the group that we worked with was called ITDF. So it's like Integrated Tribal Development Foundation. So along with the water, you know, that's like the water is important. Clean water is important. It takes helps prevent a bunch of just health things, right? But outside of that, they're working like on school for education and stuff like that for the kids. And the reason why that's so important is because most of the hill tribes don't have citizenship in Thailand, so they don't get a lot of the benefits of like being treated if they're sick in a clinic or anything like that. They kind of get brushed off to the side. So what this does now is if they go to school, the government then recognizes them and they get citizenship through that. And so that actually helps build bigger infrastructure for like getting healthcare, more opportunities, stuff like that. So I would love to go back just to see how the area that we went to continues to grow and how that plays out at some point. But if not, that's okay too. Again, like the things we don't see, right? But we got to experience part of it. But even if it was somewhere else, I would still go just to kind of, again, see how the Lord knows so well what is needed outside of what we think is needed. Because I would have never known that school was that important, but when they explained why school was so important, which education is important, but like you wonder like, sometimes, is that really necessary for a tribe in the hills? Well, it is, because it provides so much more deeper depths of physical needs and things, stuff like that. And so I would love to see how the Lord meets the needs of people in other places as well. That's cool. Really cool.
Am I up?
I guess so.
All right. Next question. How do you see God's creation or God's people differently? Ooh, I like that question.
I think again, Cafecita was something that they did, and it wasn't just with us, but they do it all the time across the country. And it made me just remember how much hospitality is a key to the gospel, a key to building the relationships. And just if people don't understand that I care or that I want to know who they are on a deeper level, then we're going to stay at the surface for years. And it could just be that until we dive deep and find out where your parents came from, how you came here, and all of these different things. Because I think when I went, I thought I grew up poor, and I joke around with the kids like, oh yeah, Dad. I mean, I didn't have that when I was young. We couldn't afford that, but we still had, we still went to school. We still had, four walls and a roof. We had a car, right? I mean, there were times where we didn't have any electricity or gas, like because of financial reasons, but to go to another country and just be reminded, like, you thought you had it pretty bad. No. Look at these people and look at the joy that they still continue to have, because there were a lot of fences up in Costa Rica. It was really kind of an interesting thing, because as we walked through the neighborhood, I notice things sometimes, and just notice all these little intricate things sometimes, and it really bothers my family, because I'm like, did you see that? And they're like, what? But there were a lot of fences up, and there weren't any front yards really. There wasn't really a backyard. But there were fences up, but they were always so open for people to come in. They were always opening the door for anyone who needed help. And they were the people who technically, right, in our Western world brain, they were the ones that needed help. But no, they were opening their doors for people to come in. And I think that was kind of that thing that made me realize that these are God's people. We just have a different zip code.
Yeah. I love that you spoke on hospitality, because that was one of the biggest things that I noticed as well. And I mean, these are families who, on both of my trips, I was in a host family too in Costa Rica, and those host families aren't getting paid extra to support a few people that are going to be living in their house for a couple weeks, right? Like, that's the sacrifice that they're making for God's kingdom, so we can go to this country and do our best to support what their needs are, and get to experience their culture, and that's the sacrifice that they're making, because they just want to build relationships with us as we're there. And so that's just such a beauty of sacrifice and relationship building and hospitality. And I think the other thing that really just continues to blow my mind, you threw out the word joy a couple times, and I just remember in Costa Rica especially, I mean, and in the DR, I worked at this, I served at the sports site both times, and there was some kids who were playing soccer, and they had cleats that were 2-3 sizes too big for them, but that's all they could get their hands on, and that's all that they could use. But these kids weren't complaining. They didn't have a care in their mind other than, man, they get to play the beautiful sport of soccer, and they get to do it with friends, family, and they just get to play the game. And same thing with baseball. There were some kids who didn't even own their own glove or mitt, and they would just show up and hope that there was an extra one at practice some days. And it's just such a beautiful picture of, it's not what you own, it's not what you have, but these kids are just enjoying the opportunities that they're given with simple things like playing a sport, and they're just having fun out there, and they're so joyful in that too. And I think it's such a humbling thing, because I mean, I grew up playing a ton of soccer, and like I was getting a new pair of cleats once, maybe twice every season, and I'm like, imagine if I had to go out there with size 15s and I'm like a size 10, because that's all I could get. The sporting world is a different story at that point, right? And so I think it's just such a beautiful sight of what joy looks like, and that joy isn't rooted in what they possess. And it's such a humbling perspective.
Yeah, I think it shows, like, here in the U.S. we're so materialistic and brand snobs in a way, but to see in the DR that they had less than we do, but they're more faithful than they are and live their life to the fullest with all joy, and they care for their relationships, like everyone was saying, but they come with whatever brand they what they have, whatever is given to them, and they're not oh, this is off brand, I'm not going to use it, how we are in the US, but to see how thankful they were for everything that they had.
I think when I think about the question asking how do we now look at God's creation and his people, I think with what we experienced on the trip, the idea of God creating man and him saying is very good. Not that we're very good on our own, right? But when we live in God's design in the way that even for a short time we got to experience what it means to love each other in that way, um, it is very good, you know. And I think it's easy to forget that sometimes because here in America, it's easy to look at the guy next to you in the freeway and be like, yeah, that guy just cut me off. What a jerk. You know what I mean? It's so much easier to not live in a loving way that God has designed us to do. To you guys' point, like the materialism or just the need or the desire for other things outside of the Lord. But like when we're there, we get to experience what it means to be in fellowship with one another in the Lord. And that was like enough, right? That's what I'm kind of hearing from you guys. And I think that's really true. It's like when we get to do that, when we're there, when we're living and abiding in Christ in doing that, like that's very good. You know, so.
I have a quick, like, did you feel like when you were there, it was easier to love the people while you were there than it is easier to love people when you're at home? Because I felt like that kind of was something that happened.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got something. I was just gonna say. So what kind of keeps ringing in my mind too is like the comparison game, and I think just with our Western society, we just get so trapped in the what does he have that I don't have? What does she have that I don't have? And again, it's just such a comparison game that distracts our mind from the beauty of what God's given us and the gratefulness of what He has given us. And I think that, you know, extends to, you know, financial prosperity, material things, the gifts that He's given us. We're called to use all of that, right? And I think that if we do get so trapped in this comparison game, we're not going to understand the beauty of what He's given us, right? It just doesn't matter how much of what it's, are we going to use what He's given us? And I think, like you said, like those, it is a little bit easier to love them because we feel like we have more. But I think that's the humbling part too, is that if you would ask them, they would probably feel like they would have more relational prosperity than we would, because they know enough about our culture to know it's just such a materialistic, business, success focused mindset. And they're like, okay, yeah, success is important, but are we honoring the Lord in that? You know? And I think those, man, it's just so much fun talking to people and so much joy having conversations with people that are focused on, I mean, like you said earlier, just being present with you, you know, being in that moment and building that relationship with you instead of what's the next appointment I got to go to? What's the next thing that can bring me success?
Yeah, I think that was one of the biggest things. And even just taking what Brad has been saying for years is like, I don't ever want to say, oh, I hate Fresno. I don't ever want to be here. And I know as a teenager, which was a long time ago, way long. A long time ago was that I just wanted to get out of here. And I think every kid has that same feeling. I want to get out of here. But as I came back and as I'm listening to Brad and he says the same exact thing, is be present here. Love on the people here, because we don't have to go across, you know, the ocean or, you know, hundreds and hundreds of miles away, thousands of miles away to love on people. And again, going on this trip, again, taking some pieces that I learned from there that again, not that I don't love people, but how do I love them more abundantly? And no matter what, even if, you know, the student gets on my nerves, you know, for the 10th time that day, you know, how do I love that kid and meet that kid where he is or she is, so that I show them Christ. I show them God's love. Because there it was super easy. I'm like, oh yeah, you know, I'm the new guy. I just want to, you know, love on you guys. And I think for my family, when we went, we talked about it and said, we want to love on the staff of Students International and just learn about them more than just, hey, everybody else that we're going to come in contact with. Because Willie and Danny, we got to meet those guys and they were great. They did sports and we got to learn a little bit about each of them. because you're there with them for the week. And at the end, Willie said something, and it really was, again, something that kind of took me off guard, because I didn't really think that I was doing anything different. But my son, who deals with sensory issues, oh, I might cry. And he has these shortcomings that make him a little different sometimes. We were sitting at ice cream the last day, and Willie's just kind of sharing with us, and he said, hey, the way you are with your kids is something that I want to do when I have my own. And I'm like, no, I'm not the greatest dad. I'm not going to lie. I fall short. And for him to see that, and for him to even notice that, that even spoke to me, right? And so anyhow, I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, so that's just kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Would you, just listening, would you say that, as much as you were there to try to love on the people, because of the relationship you built, it ended up being a very loving experience from them to you?
Yeah, it was that. My family and I, we used to do, Hume used to have camp in San Diego. Mm-hmm. And I was always the older guy, because there was always college students. I was the old guy, one of the old guys on staff. And we would bring the kids, and we'd all move down to San Diego, and we'd live in a 2-bedroom apartment for 6 to 7 weeks. Mm-hmm. And again, we would go down with the understanding of, we're not here to work for Hume, we're here to love on the staff. And we would have a conversation with the whole staff of hey, my kids are here to love on you. Mm-hmm. Just take that in. And that was the mindset we took to Costa Rica was, hey, we're here to go and love on the staff. How can we meet them where they are? How can we learn about them and what they've been through? Mm-hmm. And Willie and Danny have been through the program at SI, and they were one of the students that were reached. And now they are giving back to the community, and just an awesome thing to watch. So, yeah.
That's cool.
All right, here we go. What did you hope to see happen now that you're back? What do you pray for?
I think the thing that always stands out to me, and the hopes of coming back, is how is my heart going to be different to serve others here, right? You see all of these interactions with people, and you see other people in different countries that are just serving like it's literally their job. Like they're serving the Lord on a daily basis because that's the life that they've chosen due to obedience to the Lord. And so I think it's what does that look like for me here in the valley, here in Fresno, in the circumstances that God's given me, in the people in my life that God's given me, in the influences, fill in the blank for, anybody listening. Like, what does it look like in this season of life to just serve the Lord with passion, serve the Lord with obedience, and to just really step out in faith? And so every time I come back from a trip, I just ask myself, what does it look like for me to be different when I come back to my people in Fresno, to my city, right? Yeah.
I think when we go there, we want to in hopes to see something change, but it's more like what happens when we leave and how their hearts have changed while we were there, because we wanted to in proof in a way of that we did something. And I think more too, it's not to go change everything that they're doing, but to open our hearts to it and to see how God's working over there while we're back here in California.
Mm-hmm.
What were your biggest struggles?
Oh man. So when we were there, my wife Maddie got sick. The last day that we were there. So the biggest struggle when that happened, and she had some stuff going into it too, just with some pain physically. And so the hard part was me having this tension of like, I want to be present with what we're doing here, but at the same time, like I don't want to neglect my wife and being there for her. And so at times there was this tension of like, I said to do this, but she needs me right now, and so like I'm like running back and forth all the time, and that was probably the biggest challenge because it was a special trip for us to go because again, just like family background and stuff like that, she wanted to go and see what my grandma and stuff like that have mentioned before, like some semblance of it, right? And so she was like super excited just to go for that reason, and so there was some question if whether or not we could go still, just with the situations we were experiencing back at home leading up to it, and so it was a blessing in itself that we could actually go, and it was such a rich experience. But man, like it was so hard because I just love doing and serving and like just being with people, and yet at the same time, like I had to choose. Like I love my wife, and she's, and I don't say that begrudgingly or anything like that. Like I will choose my wife any day, right? But is to say that it was an easy choice is a lie. Like between like my flesh and like what I know what the Lord is calling me to do, which is to care for her in this moment, and by doing that, I'm still being present with what we're doing here because we're here as a team, and also we're one. And so like, if I just neglect the other half of me, like what am I doing? So.
But again, what an example for everybody there too, though, is to see you love your wife in that sense of, okay, I'm still honoring our bond, still honoring our marriage, even though I'm here for you guys. And I think that kind of going off of that whole Willie thing is, I'm just doing dad, right? And you're just doing husband. But it speaks volumes to people because they're like, wow, look at how God has shaped your marriage in this way. That's cool.
Yeah, when I think of struggles on these trips, my mind instantly goes to those who want to be in control. One of my biggest sin struggles. And so you gotta go into the expectation that you won't be in control 99% of these exposure trips, and it's such a realization of dependency, kind of like what you were talking about earlier, of Lord, what do you have for me? I don't know. I'm probably not prepared for it, but Lord, that just means that I'm going to depend on you even more, right? And so I think it's just that moment of realization that, man, on our own, we really have nothing in these circumstances, in any circumstance. And it just teaches so much of dependency on the Lord in that.
I think for me here at home, I'm very like task orientated, and like I like my to-do lists and stuff and go through them. But in like for the DR to just like hop in the back of the car and not know where we're going next, but just to be like, well, I'm with my site leaders, like they know what's happening, so I just need to like put my trust in them and like let go of my like worries of where we're going and when we're doing whatever. So just to like depend on them too, like Sawyer was saying.
Yeah, I think for us, since we were a family of 5, nobody really had room for all 5 of us to stay at one house. So we had to be super intentional, my wife and I, on when we would leave on the bus to head back to our homes, that we had conversation. We were able to kind of decompress the day. And I again, I didn't realize until then how much that was important to my life, and being able to decompress with my wife and just share what has happened during the day. Because yes, we were at the same sites together, but we may have seen something different because I kind of pick up on some things and just notice things. But that was the big struggle. And yet I'm in education, and I love to run things, and I love to help. And not being able to control things was really hard, and just like, ooh, that could have been better if I would have done. But just sitting back and being the student more this time than the teacher was hard. But again, it was because I was relying on, well, God, I could do this better, right? And you're like, no, we're doing fine here. You're just here to come and help.
Yeah, definitely.
I love what you said about being away from your wife a lot. Like that was pretty real too, because we weren't in the same hut either.
Yeah.
And so I felt like we barely saw each other, and we both acknowledged at one point, like at a low point throughout one of the days, we're just like, it just feels like we're off.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel great.
Yeah.
It was true, so.
Next up, we got, what do you think God's calling you to because of this experience?
I think you should take this one to start. You being the youngest one.
I think for this being my third mission trip for the summer, just to like the want to go back and be like, I want to do this for like the rest, like each year for high school, moving forward, and just like go with a new team, experience it over, but like you gain something every time you go. So I think just like the want to go back and see how the Lord, or what the Lord is doing there, just each year and like annually of what's happening.
For me, this is Rosa knows this. I'm speaking to Rosa. She's in the other room right now. Missions is always one of the heaviest things on my heart. I wrote myself a letter on one of the last days when I was in the DR, and I told myself, I was like, it's going to be different now. Like my heart just breaks for these people in these countries, and I never want these kinds of trips and serving in this kind of capacity to not be a part of my life. And so, whatever that looks like, I love missions. I love exposure trips. Again, like I said, like my heart just breaks for these people because I want to serve them. And I know in a selfish way too, I know their influence on me and how much they impact my life as well. And again, we've already talked about why they're called exposure trips, because when you get to see these people and how you interact with them and how they interact with you, it's such a beautiful picture of God's kingdom. And so I just want to continue on with this path. And I feel like this last mission trip really just set so much conviction in my heart. And the Holy Spirit was just speaking to me so much of this is going to be a big part of your life moving forward. And I've had some good conversations with good people in different countries and here of what that could look like. I don't know. We'll see what the Lord has for me. But that this will be a part of my life moving forward because of the impact that I want to have on others and that I know others will have on me too.
I think this trip the Lord used to help kind of just reaffirm some things that I feel like he's been calling me into for a while, which is just to being a pastor. But not just to like for the sake of being in the role of teaching in a pulpit or anything like that, but in the way of shepherding and loving other people, for them to be able to see what it means to have their identity in Christ, their joy in Christ, and fellowship in Christ. And so, and how I see that is because when we were there, I just felt like I got to live out that, again, that relational aspect of like, this is who God is. This is how he met us. And now we get to reflect that to everyone else, like, so here we are going into another country, can't speak a lick of the language. And yet somehow we're all still doing it. And I think that's such an encouragement and something that's needed, especially here. We talked about how it's easy not to love each other here in America. So I feel like he's just continuing to reaffirm, like, hey, Trevor, I wired you a certain way to care for these kind of things. Now go learn, go and do. And that's why I'm here at the well now. It's like I had fought this path of going into ministry for a really long time, like early college.
Never say no.
Yeah. Well, it was more of like a no to myself because I had never really saw myself as like good enough for it, right? And yet when I was growing up, I always longed for someone to come alongside me in a way that I didn't necessarily receive. Not to say I didn't have great parents or anything like that, but you know how like there are just certain things that you wish that you could have expressed more or something like that. There were parts of my life that I just wish I could have done with someone else and like who would have poured into me. And that's when I heard about Jesus. I was like, wow, he's literally that person. And so that's something I wish to do for others, and that's what's kind of spurred and led me on to do now to do what I'm doing now, which is to help others experience that and see who Christ is. And so, yeah, I don't know what that like. I don't know what the next steps are moving forward, but I feel really sure in that now. And it was funny because like when I was on the trip, there were moments where I had some doubts of like that calling again. I was like, why am I doing this again? Like, I could easily just be working and doing this still, or I could become a missionary or work for ITDF. Like, I could still do these things are great. I could do that. But it was really sweet because what my team did afterwards was they kind of went around and affirmed each other and stuff like that. I was sick. I didn't go to that meeting. I was at the hotel like dying, but they recorded a video of affirming me, which is really sweet. And so, but in watching those videos, I just felt super moved, and so I'm very grateful for the trip in that. Even like, again, how the Lord meets us in these things is so funny. It's like you don't expect it to in that way, especially even for like what am I supposed to do with my life, right? And yet here I am now. I'm like, all right, Lord, like thank you. I needed that. I didn't know I needed that, but I needed that. Thank you.
Yeah, if I can just say really quick too, I love that part of your story right now, just like how God revealed something to you, and, it's the affirming idea of, you in ministry. And I think back to like our first question of why go on exposure trips, I think that's one of the reasons. I think God will reveal so much that you might not have an opportunity to if you kind of just stay complacent with where you're at, and just kind of you just keep going through the motions. I think when you go on these kinds of trips, man, the Lord convicts you. He convicts you in places that, again, I don't think you would have a lot of opportunity to be convicted for in certain other, circumstances and situations. But I mean, I felt very affirmed too in like my decision to like pursue missions as well, and just like what serving looked like in my life and my last trip too. And so just like hearing that for you, it's just like, it's so sweet to hear how the Lord moves in these trips. And I think like that's encouragement to listeners of like, I don't know my giftings. I don't know what God has for my life. Man, go to a different country and see what the Lord has for you. Like, just see what happens. Trust in the Lord for a couple weeks. Go explore like what the Lord has for you. And I promise you, He'll reveal something in your heart.
Well, isn't that the perfect mindset to go in with? Is I don't really have the gifting to do this. I don't really. And that is when God steps in and says, yeah, you can't. You can't do this. I'm here to bridge that gap, to strengthen you, to give you the words, to whatever it may be, to be there and be present in those times, with wherever you're at. If you ever go into something thinking you know it all, man, is it going to hurt.
You're in trouble.
You're in trouble, right? It is going to stink, and you are going to mess up and think that it's all for naught. But going in knowing that, I think you said it, going with my hands out, saying, I surrender. You're going to do everything, Lord. I'm just a vessel at this point. Do what you must. And He will. And that's kind of the cool thing.
Yeah. So next question, I have two here. How did you see God move on your exposure trip?
I mean, just in our family, just again, realizing how blessed we are, and how God is moving in other countries, and just being able to show our children that. And again, we want to get them out in the world so that they can be a light in the world, and so that they can also see other lights in the world. And I think that's kind of that reason. They got to see other lights in the world and not just around the corner.
Yeah, I saw God moving not only through the people in Harabacoa who lived there, but also through the team of high schoolers that we went with, just to see like after like every day, just discussing with them like how they saw God moving. So just see like we were at one site, but God was moving in 12 other sites all over the city. So seeing how God was maybe through them, through the people, and just them in their own life.
Yeah, I think I saw the Lord move in our team as well. The idea of having a multiple generational team, so kids as young as like 10 and people as old as like in their 60s and retired. But the idea of how much everyone in that group was perfectly made to fit that team. And each one of them used their gifts and talents exactly the way the Lord has made them to fit every scenario that we could have thought of. For example, we all got sick and we had 2 nurses and a doctor on the team.
That's awesome.
Stuff like that, you know. So
Right, that first meeting, you think, how are we all going to work together?
Right,
Like,
yeah.
how do these people fit together? And you just see that God bridged those gaps and put us together, and you were there for a reason.
Yeah, it was so cool.
Well, yeah, I love that you just said that too. Just like you're starting off going on this trip with, you know, people you don't even know, in that first meeting of like, what is this dynamic going to look like? But I think it's just beautiful when you can see what the kingdom and all these different spiritual gifts and all these different personalities, like what those interactions can look like when you are all uncomfortable and like you're walking through what does it look like to go in a different country that we don't know their language, and how can we care for each other in that. It's just like all the trips that I've been on, it's such a sweet picture of God just bringing people together, you know?
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that I would say, how I saw God move was just obedience, what obedience truly looks like for many people in very different circumstances and, you know, ages of life, just, you know, different areas of life, just what their obedience looks like, and just saying yes to God. I think you see a lot of these people who just said yes, and then they're going to say, I'm going to see what you're going to do, Lord, but I'm just going to say yes right now to this trip and see what comes from it. So I think obedience was one of the biggest takeaways for me on these kinds of trips. Last question we got is, what would you tell someone who is thinking about going on an exposure trip? To wrap it up, final thoughts. What are we thinking?
That you should listen and just go.
Just
Like,
do it.
I mean, hands down, like, even if there's an inkling of, maybe, no, just do it. I mean, take the step of faith, take the leap. I mean, when our family went, it was all 5 of us, and it was $10,000 that we had to raise. And just even the faith of my wife saying, man, can we really do this? And we did some fundraisers along the way. We hid eggs right? Cause we went, right. It was during spring break and during Easter. It was like 11:30 at night, and we're hiding eggs in people's backyard. I'm like, sweetheart, the police are going to come. I promise they're going to come. But we, you know, all of these things, but we took that step of faith, and now our kids are going on missions trips every summer, or exposure trips on every summer, and just coming back, understanding just so much more about who God is and what he's doing everywhere.
Yeah, I think to do it, it like seems overwhelming. You're like, I'm going to a different country with the team I like barely know, and just to like go out there and do it, have your heart open to it, and see like, and you'll see so much more than like if you're like, this is what I'm going to do, but have an open mind, open heart to God, to have him work through your life and through your teams.
I think it would be to be expectant and go, but not expectant of what you would hope it to be, but expect them and be open to what the Lord would have it be, because it's going to happen anyway. So save yourself the trouble of being super disappointed.
That's true. Yeah. And to add to that too, I think my final thought would be, God's going to reveal what he'll reveal on these trips. But you might not get an opportunity for that unless you just say yes. Step out in faith, like you're talking about, and just say yes to God. And he's going to reveal things that, kind of like I alluded to earlier, you might not ever really get a chance to. Yeah. And I think like if you're feeling a little bit of conviction towards like what serving looks like in your life, how you can use your gifts, what your gifts are, and you're listening, man, just do it. Just do it. Like you're saying, James, like there's not a better opportunity than going to a different country, serving with an organization that's already doing the Lord's work, with people who are so like-minded and just want to spread the gospel. And it is just such a picture of the beauty of the kingdom. So just say yes.